Okay, go ahead. All right, start again. As Christiane said, today Susan and I are going to talk about two of the most challenging aspects of the oral trial, the oral system. This morning I'm going to talk about assessing credibility, and this afternoon Susan's going to talk about how we can be assured that eyewitness testimony is reliable and correct. The oral system has many advantages. One of them is the obvious transparency, the fact that everything takes place in open court. But it can also be misleading. And what we are trying to get at today, and what we have been struggling with at the NJI, as Christiane said, for many years now, is how can we improve our system so that the testimony in court is not misleading, or does not mislead us and result in incorrect, and come to incorrect results. And the way I want to start is by telling you the story about how we came to deal with these subjects. In the last 30 years, we've had a very particular history in Canada. We have had a number of commissions of inquiry that have looked into the wrongful conviction of innocent people, all men who were convicted of very serious crimes. And what the Canadian system tried to do is to look at why those convictions happen. Here we have a system that is well-resourced, where the accused often, although not always the case, but often had a good lawyer, where there were trained police that were investigating the case, where there were prosecutors, usually very senior prosecutors, who were prosecuting the case, experienced judges who were presiding at the case, and what is supposed to be the hallmark of the oral common law system, a trial by jury. And yet, in those cases, there were innocent men were convicted of very serious crimes. And so, rather than simply ignore the problem, what we did is establish these commissions of inquiry to look at the causes. What went wrong? How could this oral system, of which we are so proud, produce these incorrect results? These commissions produced reports. They're available online if any of you are interested. I'm going to talk about one of them in particular. But as a result of these commissions, we started to get some answers as to why things could go wrong. With all of the safeguards, we started to get some answers. And what we were asked to do at the NJI, at the National Judicial Institute, was to develop a course to assist judges in dealing with these issues so that the judges could be part of the solution, could prevent wrongful convictions, help prevent wrongful convictions. And we developed this course. We've now given it many times over many years. And two of the key elements of the course are what we are going to talk about today. Because time and again, what these commissions of inquiry pointed to was, number one, that judges, juries, prosecutors, police were making mistakes in assessing credibility. They were people who were lying, were believed to be telling the truth, and people who were telling the truth, like the defendant, were being disbelieved. And so we wanted to understand what's going on. Why is that happening? And secondly, what the reports showed us time and time again was the problem of eyewitness identification. And I'll say no more about that because Susan is going to deal with that this afternoon. Perhaps the most important change for us in understanding credibility is that for the last 100 years, until very recently, 100 years, 200 years, we have dealt with credibility like it was common sense. That you just had to see the witness and you'd apply your common sense and magically you would be able to tell whether the person was telling the truth or not. What we have tried to understand is that, in fact, looking at the person, watching the person, can actually be misleading and can lead to incorrect results because of assumptions we make about the way people act and the way people testify. We have a story, a children's story in the English-speaking world, and you've probably heard of it, Pinocchio, yes? Everybody knows the Pinocchio story. So judges had it in their mind that there was some kind of Pinocchio effect. They would just watch the witness and their nose would grow and they would know whether they were telling the truth. Well, turns out it's not so easy. And so what I want to tell you about is, as Christian said, the complexity of credibility and what we can learn from the science. That there's more to this than common sense. So, this is what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm just going to give you kind of an overview of how do we assess credibility, what are the mechanisms that are at play in the courtroom. Secondly, I'm going to hopefully demonstrate to you that we make mistakes. I'm going to give you some of the evidence that shows we make mistakes. Thirdly, and most importantly, I think, is I'm going to try to explain why we make mistakes, because this is where the science comes in. And by knowing why we make mistakes, then hopefully we can improve the system. Maybe we can get better at what we're doing. No magic answers. At the end of this, there's not going to be any Pinocchio effect, but maybe I'll be able to help. So number one, how do we assess credibility? 3 basic concepts about how we decide whether someone is credible, or that go into the idea of credibility.